to 60%.
So now it's clear it applies to all three categories: non-conforming lots, non-conforming buildings, and non-conforming uses. And then if your use and building were residential, you can rebuild to the same footprint. If you're a business, one of two or three things happens under the ordinance as it's written now. You either conform, which means sometimes shrink the size of your building, square it off, move it so it's not on a property line, so you can conform, or you take that pot of money that you get from the insurance company, and again, nowadays you can also buy ordinance coverage, which pays you more than your actual loss if, because of your loss, you're required to meet a higher threshold. You take that pot of money, you sell the land that you're at, you put that money with the insurance money, and you go rebuild your use, and you do it in the place that the planners want you to. And with some degree of confidence, I can tell you, most planners will not like weakening this any further. I mean, why have a vision of where you want the township to be and the businesses to be if you're simply always going to allow people to rebuild? You're not providing the incentive to either scale back or move or change their building or their footprint to do it. Because again, you can almost always rebuild. It's just a question of, do you have to kind of change how intensely you're using your land so that it meets modern standards? So you either meet modern standards, or you take that, or you move it to a different location where you either have more land or it's more appropriate for that. So I'm not here, and I've probably said too much. You're the policymakers. There's a reason you have a limitation on being rebuilt, and that's so that you get to that vision that the planners have. At the end of the day, you're free to do what you want, and I'll write whatever you want. My guess is if you were to ask your planning commission, they probably wouldn't like as far as you've gone. Certainly don't want you going further, but that's an assumption. I've not spoken with them, and I don't think they've taken a vote, so take that with a grain of salt.
I think our situation here is unique, Doug, and that's probably why we look at it the way we do for these businesses that are right along 25, the 5 of them, if there are. They have water there now. We don't have sewer. There's not necessarily a lot of other land available with water, and of course none of it has sewer. And we don't necessarily want to lose our tax base, what little we have. So if they have to move on to another area, we've lost them. And, that may not be, but I just don't have a problem with what would show up probably as non-conforming. I don't see as an issue with what we have right now. I think there's adequate parking. We weren't that happy with our planner. We worked on this ordinance over and over.
It may be that, if you're saying that, then it may be that the restrictions in your ordinance have too much parking requirements. But the other thing is, if somebody comes in and has a plan, they could always go to the ZBA for a particular variance on a particular issue.
Right.
It's difficult to take an ordinance and apply it to a whole township. Mm-hmm. And frankly, I don't know how much is unique about Burtchville. I know it's a unique place to live, but your issues are issues that have been experienced all over the state of Michigan and all over every state. But when you look at it, it's very hard to have an ordinance and not be able to find one example, one in the spectrum, and one example the other in the spectrum, where it's like, gosh, I wish we would have phased that out, or I wish we wouldn't have been so hard on John. It's a rule. Rules are always going to be difficulty, and to some extent that's what you have a ZBA for, so that they can make some exceptions. But you are the policymakers. You can tell me to do it more loosely as you have it. You can send it back to planning for recommendation. You can keep it as is, or come up with a fourth variation. You have those options.
If I could ask you a question too in this bottom paragraph, again, why we're looking at it. It says non-conforming use has been occupied in regular manner, occupied for the structure for 1 year preceding the damage or destruction exceeding the standard identified in this section may be rebuilt to the same dimensions. Do we want to that dimension, should that be footprint?
They're the same thing. Pretty much the same thing. I think dimensions probably are the proper.
And then I guess the other question I'd have on that is, in this ordinance, if they can rebuild that piece of property, you know, which this ordinance is saying they can. Now, do they have to build it to the new code? If
The
possible?
building code, the building
Yeah,
code.
the building code.
Absolutely.
I mean, in the setbacks too, or not? Or is it just saying they can build it right in the same footprint?
That's what it's saying.
Well, right now, it's saying the setback, if it's commercial, it's gotta meet the new setback.
Right.
Well, no, this is just the residential part I'm talking about right now, on this, you know.
Yeah. Well, and perhaps it would be more clear if you're looking at the red line, look.
Yeah.
If we look at that red line, when the second full line of red line, if we add the word residential between non-conforming and use, because that's really what was intended, and that might make that more clear. But because we're talking about use in this paragraph, we're really just talking about returning it to its original use. It has nothing to do with building code. I mean, once you get inside that building, it's got to, I mean, building code.
I didn't mean building, I misspoke, I didn't mean building codes, I meant, you know.
No, it means you could rebuild to the same footprint and you could rebuild to the same use. And again, this was designed for two separate areas. One would be the non-conforming lots of record that are 35 or to 40-foot lots up there, which have that issue of the 10% setback on either side would be greater than what they could still do and have a usable lot. The second area were those that were in the your general business or commercial district that are residential in use, and you just have a unique resident or unique commercial general business district that does not allow residential uses. Most do. So we're allowing properties in those that were occupied and used as residential can be returned to that. So two different areas, the non-conforming residential use and then the non-conforming lots of record.
So you think that should be added though?
You know, in hindsight, as I look at it, I probably would add the word residential just so it's crystal clear. But then again, the issue that your folks are here to talk about today might change that.
Right.
You might decide that you always want these and you don't want to have that pressure to have the gradual phase out. Now keep in mind, 60% destruction of properties is in itself a rare event, but certainly can happen.
We've had it happen.
Bill?
May I ask a question?
Yes.
What do we do with buildings that are totally destroyed and they're overlapping on the other property?
That's interesting.
We have that.
How many?
I don't know how many, but I know of 4 or 5 right off the top of my head.
What do you mean they're overlapping now?
They're not just on their property, they're 8 or 10 or a foot over on the next
How many
property.
years have they been like
As
that?
a separate issue of property rights, you.
Well, but
would
you're
not
saying
be
the
able to-
footprint is destroyed. What do I do with that? That's what I'm asking.
See, I look at that as that's a civil problem if it ever come up, it's a civil problem between the property.
Well, but that's been the question asked of me, because there are some like that.
Well, I guess probably with it being spelled out
Do
the
I
same
move them over or
dimensions.
what?
Same dimensions is probably better than the footprint, because the footprint would be right exactly where it is, where with the same dimensions.
Yeah,
You're
same
12 inches
dimensions, I
over
can
a
move
neighbor's
them over.
lot, you could use them same dimensions, and just move it over 12
Yeah.
inches.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where if
Make
it's
it
that
clear on
footprint,
that. That's what I look at.
you couldn't probably use that.
Again, isn't that a civil issue?
No, that would make
Well, I mean,
sense.
we're talking about two different issues.
I understand that, but
Interesting. I think
that's what I'm
analysis
asking.
is very good, but the encroached upon neighbor, not a matter of township law. The
Well,
encroached,
some are neighbors,
Nothing.
some are on MDOT property, some are on county property.
the encroached upon individual
Yeah.
could prevent that from reoccurring. The encroachment from being recreated.
Yeah.
That would be a civil thing, correct?
It certainly isn't township
Yeah,
business.
it's not a business, really.
But we also don't let people build on property that they don't own. So
Right.
from a
Right.
permit perspective, that could be an issue there. But
I
that's one
assume these are
scenario
pretty
where
old.
where having the word dimensions does have a somewhat different impact than if you were to use the word footprint.
Right.
I think so.
Yeah, that's all I'm asking.
Probably way to go with that way.
Or could have been numb law.
So the way this reads, like a house that's sitting on commercial property now, new commercial property now, could still be rebuilt. Because
Absolutely.
it's a residence.
That was the main
That was-
focal point of this, so
Yeah.
people can get their mortgages and insurance for really what they are. I think you even had one resident who was denied a mortgage at one point.
Yes.
That was completely unintended, at least
Right.
one that we know of.
Mhm.
Yes.
And again, just a quirk in your commercial ordinance, your general business district. I don't know that.
So maybe we need to think about that.
Well, I think then with that being said, that bottom part left the way it is, unless you're gonna add residents in there.
I would, if you're going to adopt anything, if you're gonna pass any resolutions tonight, I think it would be a benefit if we had residential between non-conforming and use in the fifth line up from the bottom. Yeah.
So non-conforming residential use?
Oh, wait a
Yes.
minute.
Notwithstanding proceeding, a residential structure on a non-conforming lot of record, or that is a lawful non-conforming, yeah, actually, it is
It's already covered.
necessary.
Yeah, it's already covered.
Okay, so now we want to look at the commercial
It's actually
business.
general business more than commercial. We only have a small commercial area, do we not? That's on Harris Road. How far north does that go? I haven't got the book in front of me. And our-
Well, and really what you're talking about, I mean, depending on how far you take it, you're really talking about taking the 60% rule out. So you're really not adding as much as you are just striking that whole limitation.
Well, if you took the 60% out, then everything's covered.
That's right.
Right, absolutely.
That's
You
what I
just-
said all along.
Yeah.
You would just have no pressure to have
Conform.
an ordinance, a town that matches what your ordinance looks like. You're just providing a little nudge to get to that vision.
Anything, the intent
Yes,
was
sir.
anything after 2006.
I was at the planning commission when the planner came, and I've only been here for 4 years, but in the economic times that we have right now, I understand these things can be changed at any time, if I don't misunderstand this. And to force a business out of business today is a little unfair. If Fort Gratiot starts moving this way, then trying to get those businesses off of, or those homes off of general business, I can fully understand. But to have a guy who owns a little house or a little cabin somewhere that's not conforming, and if something happens to it, today, to have them not be able to rebuild, or not be able to rebuild to their footprint. I asked Mr. Tuma if this really included all the 400 or 400 plus things that were on that master list, and I was told yes, that they would now be able to rebuild.
All the residential.
All the residential, but I also asked about everything along 25. So my understanding in that question, or my question in that question was, will it also include businesses? If there's only 5 businesses, it's like, well, okay. But like Mrs. Tremble, I agree. You got 5 businesses here. We need every business we can get right now. If you want to change that in 5 years, if the climate changes, it can always be changed. I mean, it was changed back then with the A and B, then they did away with the A and B. I don't see anything wrong with loosening up a regulation when we all know that it can be tightened back up again should the climate change.